morning, Alex. I'm doing very well. I've had a few computer problems this morning, but all solved at the moment, I think.
I love that. I know, yeah. I was told you were updating your computer, and I was like, that must be your sort of spyware systems in your Cape Canaveral. You're having to reboot today before you can connect to us.
Well, I think the Russians knew I was going to talk to you about them, so they were trying to interfere.
I know. I'm very much top of the list when it comes to the Kremlin's concerns. I'm sure of that. Right, now, talking about Russia. What's going on with all of these little explosions? We now know the package that was outside the US Embassy was sort of a hoax package. It looks like it could go kaboom, it couldn't go kaboom. Similar things at Euston Station, similar things in Chester, something similar at a bus stop in Glasgow. The list goes on. There are a number of incidents over the last few days. And I don't know about you. Let's put our tinfoil hats on. There we go. I don't know about you, but something about this pattern makes me think, could this be the GRU? Is this Russia flexing their muscles after Storm Shadow? Because I kind of feel like if this was terrorism or Islamist terrorism, those packages would be connected to human beings and would have probably actually gone off. Yeah. So what are your thoughts?
Yeah, well, I don't do coincidences, especially whenever you get so many things coming together. And of course, we've got drones flying over a couple of US airfields based in the UK, US Air Force airfields based in the UK as well, and reports around that. If you think back a few years ago, we had the drone incident around Gatwick that was at this time of the year, disrupting things. And we had mysteriously a big Union flag appeared on the scaffolding around Salisbury Cathedral. And those, I would suggest, were probably the GRU doing it just because they can for a few Christmas laughs. And again, it wouldn't surprise me if the counter-terror police and security services are assessing this as the GRU potentially carrying out disruption operations. It's certainly someone trying to disrupt what we're doing, and all likelihood I'd point to them and look at them first.
Yeah, exactly, because it doesn't seem to me, like I said, it seems to be more focused on disruption than actual destruction. And you kind of think, well, who has that agenda? Who doesn't actually want to necessarily go down the route of what would happen if one of these devices had detonated, but they do want the maximum fallout from people in panic and trains delayed and our security services and our police being given the runaround.
Yeah, they say it as a bit of fun. I think they're just having a laugh, sending a message saying we can still play around with you, we can mess you around, not doing anything that's going to cause any real damage, but it's disruption, and they can then watch our reactions to that disruption and watch the political fallout, and that's what they're all about.
Yeah, they often like to try and test resilience and test our ability to cope with certain situations, how we manage them. They can gather evidence and data for how they can do more things in the future. But this also comes in the wake, of course, of the UK saying to Ukraine, we don't know, not confirmed, of course, by Number 10, but saying to Ukraine, you can use our Storm Shadow missiles inside Russian territory. And France have recently said much the same. And America have gone hell for leather on this. Finally, Joe Biden has decided, right, I might only have about a month or so left in office. I'm going to come out hard for Ukraine, when actually he's been a little bit lily-livered, let's say, in the past. What do you think the game plan is here when it comes to NATO, when it comes to America, when it comes to the UK? Is this all because they know Trump's coming in and they worry that he's going to go down a different route?
Well, I've got a slightly different view. I think that Trump's team could have turned around to Biden's team and said, look, we've got the election over and done with now. The result is quite clear. Will you make the decision, reference ATACMS, so that gives President Trump more wiggle room when he gets in? And he's not, one of his first decisions is not having to make that decision. So it wouldn't surprise me if Trump's team were fully behind the decision on the authorization of ATACMS, which is a short-range ballistic missile, and also then releasing the restrictions against the use of the American-controlled items in the Storm Shadow and the Scalp missiles that UK and France have now authorized Ukraine to use into Russia. Of course, all of these systems have been used inside Ukraine, in the occupied areas of Ukraine, for months and months and months now.
And do you think as well, because it's clear that there is an agenda from Donald Trump to sit down and try and end this war. He said it repeatedly during the campaign. He's a man who wants to sort of live up to expectations. And do you think this is also a way of essentially battering Russia down to the weakest point possible before any sort of offers made to Putin, in order that you want to get, if you want to sort of sort something out, you want to be able to have someone forced into a corner if they're your foe, rather than be in a position of strength when you sit down around the negotiating table?
I think it's certainly battering Putin. It's not going to batter his forces in a way that they are, it's going to overwhelm them and they're going to be in a position where they're close to surrender. Putin is suffering at the moment. But if we look at a number of things that's happened since the election, we had this phone call from President Trump to President Putin that the Russians have denied. The Russian spokesman Peskov said it didn't happen. Well, Trump's team said that they talked about negotiating positions for the end of the war. And then what was the reaction immediately after that? It was naked pictures of Melania Trump, the president's wife, plastered all over Russian television. We then get the authorization for the use of the ATACMS, the Storm Shadow and the Scalp missiles. Russia's reaction is to launch a new intermediate range ballistic missile that has got the range to hit anywhere in Europe. And you do a bit of my missile is bigger than your missile waving. I was going to say something else, but not on air. And that's what we're seeing at the moment. And therefore, my assessment of that is Putin is worried. He's worried about this relationship that he thought he had with Trump, and Trump is certainly threatening him. He's also, I suspect, threatening Zelensky. But Zelensky's response is, yes, of course we're going to talk. Here's our peace plan. Here's our path to peace. I'll sit down with you and talk. And therefore, he's playing the nice guy, and Putin is playing the I'm not going to give an inch. That's going to push Trump into a very interesting position. And I think he's going to have to back Zelensky. That's why Zelensky is turning around saying President Trump may not be a bad thing for Ukraine. He may be a very good thing for Ukraine. I think you're probably right on that front. And I think Zelensky's probably right on that front. Now, let's talk about something that's going to come into the news tomorrow, which is a big discussion on cyber attacks. It's a big cyber conference, and we understand that we're going to be warned that one of the greatest threats that we face from an activated and enraged Putin is the ability for Russian hacktivists to break into our systems, to potentially turn off power supplies, plunge us into darkness. We know they've hacked into hospital software before and caused a huge amount of issues with people waiting for elective surgeries, some of them important things like organ transplants. And that, once again, cyber is a front line when it comes to grey zone warfare. Cyber's never been off the front line when it comes to grey zone warfare, and we're very lucky in this country where we've got an organisation called the National Cyber Security Centre, which is part of the government communications headquarters, GCHQ at Cheltenham. But what it does is it looks at the threats that are coming in from a national perspective and impacting businesses and critical national infrastructure, and it provides advice out for free and helps mitigate those threats. And it's had some very real successes over the years. But cyber is a big area where the Russians will use not just national capability, but they subcontract out to a lot of these cyber criminal organizations, the advanced persistent threat organizations that are operating out of Russia, and get them to carry out lots of activities. And they can overwhelm us with the attacks on cyber. And of course, they'll exploit our use of these sorts of things as well to try and access data, disrupt activities and everything else. And they'll not do any one thing, I think, that will completely overwhelm us. But they can do lots of things that, when you put them together, could come close to overwhelming us. Yeah, it's interesting when you had those sort of cargo fires as well on DHL planes, and was it Germany, UK and Poland, where apparently there'd been sort of explosive devices fitted to massage equipment that all happened to go off in these hangars. And, that is quite sense of humour. I mean, in a dark way. That's definitely a form of Kremlin trolling. Let's now focus our attention on Israel, on America, on Sir Keir Starmer, on the ICC arrest warrant.
Starmer's come out and said, I think, what we all expected him to say, which is we respect the independence of the International Criminal Court. As a former prosecutor, I wouldn't have imagined him going down any other direction. He won't be beholden to saying whether he would arrest Netanyahu if he flew into Britain, but one assumes that that means that he would if he's going to respect the decision of the ICC. America, a very different view, obviously not members of the ICC, neither is Israel, but basically turning around and saying this is farcical, it's a politicised judgment. And now a Trump ally has warned Keir Starmer that the US would crush the UK economy if Britain helps arrest Benjamin Netanyahu. I know where I fall on which side of the argument I fall on when it comes to this. I think the ICC is just a joke institution. The man who's come up with this ruling once defended William Ruto in the ICC, who's currently the president of Kenya. So, you know, what do these arrest warrants do anyway, frankly speaking? And I do think that when it comes to these sort of almost civilizational battles and the anti-Western axis, we've got to stand with our allies. That's where I am on this. But do you have any sympathy for Starmer being put in this situation where he sort of feels like he can't go along with America and be robust? Perhaps he doesn't want to.
Well, in some ways, I have a little bit of sympathy for him because he is he is a lawyer by background, and he wants to apply the law that's out there. But this is where he needs to get a bit of backbone. Again, I was going to use another phrase, but again, not an error.
Yeah, 11:30 on God's Day. Let's leave genitalia out of this.
Oh, you can read my mind. But get a bit of backbone in the same way that he should have done with the Storm Shadow and just said, to hell with it, use them. What he should say to ICC is, this is ridiculous, this is politically motivated. If you look at the chief prosecutor who brought this in, I've seen it reported that he is anti-Semitic, pro-Palestinian, and has got some quite extreme views in what's going on. This is a political decision. It's trying to cause Israel real political difficulties. Now, is Netanyahu cleaner than clean? No. Does he have to answer for certain things? Yes. But is Israel doing everything it can in what it's doing in Gaza and then in Lebanon to try and deal with the terrorists in a way that we couldn't do and try and keep civilian casualties to an absolute minimum? Of course he is. And I've got friends who've been there independently assessing the targeting processes and all the rest of it. They say they haven't seen anything so slick and so good before. Will mistakes happen? Yes, they do. But that's the nature of warfare. And this is where the international community is reacting to losing the information domain. Hamas, terror organizations are controlling people's opinions because they're controlling the information domain. We need to get the truth out there. This is politically motivated, and Starmer should turn around and go, no, we're not, and make a clear statement to say we're not going to implement this ruling.
Brilliant and very candid there from Philip. Now, I'm sure that you're sort of umming and nodding along with that. I think we're all here in agreement that, all the reports coming out of Israel, they say it themselves. But, of course, in these situations, you've got to think, well, they are going to say they're doing all they can to provide food aid, to vaccinate the population, to clinically target where they land those missiles. It's in terms of the theatre of war. It's a particularly heavily populated and urbanized small area that they're dealing with, very different, let's say, from other wars that have raged in previous years. But if the evidence is there, if people going along and assessing this, saying, well, this is a war and Israel's doing their best, then surely, when we know that this is essentially the anti-Western axis versus the West and its allies, surely we should do as Philip's saying and stand up and join America and say enough is enough, because when the West unites, it has the power, it's got the strength, and it's got the capability to push all of its enemies away.
Oh, I couldn't agree more, but you're asking people without a spine to develop one in the space of 30 seconds. I think everything Philip said there was absolutely spot on. It is a political decision, but you're relying on Keir Starmer, a man who has no spine and no backbone, and is driven mainly by a focus of a bureaucrat who is process. So, yes, of course he was going to go with the ICC, and he believes in the ICC and all this kind of international organisational world because it is structure and it is boundaries and it is easier for him to operate in. Taking a stand requires saying, I know what you're saying, but the system is wrong. And Keir Starmer is part of that system that believes in it, and he's never going to do it because it's not within him to do it. So it was when this got announced, I was like, we're going to hear the anti-Semitism claim, we're going to hear, oh, it's the Labour Party and all the rest of it. And I do think there is an element of that, particularly within the Labour Party. But when it comes to Keir Starmer himself, it's not that I don't think he lacks the ability to take a stand. It's that he doesn't see the need to take a stand because he believes that the system will survive. He doesn't get that freedom requires a fight. And then sometimes you have to get your hands dirty. It's not all nice, like the boardrooms and things like that. Sometimes it's wars, it's conflict, it's death. And unfortunately, if we want to protect the values and our way of life, we have to get in the fight.
Yeah.
Where is the West? We are not in this fight. So yeah, when we unite, when we come together, we can put down the most vicious and awful threats the world has ever seen. But we have to unite. And at the back of the day, we stood together because we united around ideas. But the problem is we have allowed those ideas to disappear and to be denigrated.
And we've allowed other cancers to come into public consciousness.
Exactly.
Like Philip was saying, the terrorists are now controlling the information domain.
There is no backbone because we don't believe in ourselves anymore. We don't believe that our way of life, that we're worth fighting for.
Yeah.
That is why we are in the situation right across the world, whether it be China, Russia, Israel, Gaza, all of it. It's because we took a step back, because we allowed from within bad actors to take control of our institutions and say, you're the bad guy, you're wrong, all of this is your fault, and it's not.
Yeah, they defecated on 2,000 years worth of history, heritage and culture.
In about
now look
60
where we
seconds.
are.